You're live.
Great. Welcome back. Back to the House Transportation Committee. We're continuing with our afternoon work. It is Wednesday, March 1st, and we are working on our memo to the House Appropriations Committee. We had a committee discussion yesterday, and our legislative council and joint fiscal office staff worked in translating our discussion into a coherent memo to the Appropriations Committee. So we're going to review this, and we're going to finalize. I hope to finalize this draft. So welcome back, Anthony. Thank you for turning this around so quickly for both you and Chris.
So for the record, Anthony Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Chris gave me very clear directions from your committee discussion, wrote up some language that I tinkered with, and I watched your discussion from yesterday. So what I'm passing out is what is going to be up on the screen. So if you'll remember, this year, the House Appropriations Committee is trying something new with these charts that they asked for comments to be filled in. So that is the main piece of your response. And I printed these in color since what the committee is saying, Representative Bonney, you might want one, since what the committee is saying in red is your response. You will see referenced in this document, see attachment 1. Those are for technical corrections, and Chris showed you this document yesterday. This is a color document. I just didn't print it in color since it wasn't significant for purposes of your discussion now. I think I printed one for Chris as well. That might be where the extra is. And then finally, you'll see when you get to the discussion about the transfer of I'm going to just call it $10 million. The $10 million, or maybe we should call it $11 million. Yeah. $11 million for the transfer from the general fund to the transportation fund. In this one, you'll see attachment 2. And I am now going to pass out attachment 2.
Chris, this is attachment 1.
That's attachment 1. It's labeled at the top.
Oh, there we go.
And this says in the introduction that it is attachment 2.
Yeah.
So the way it goes together is main document, attachment 1, attachment 2. And if you guys finalize this, I will turn this into one PDF that is then sent to House Appropriations all in a row, as opposed to having the 3 separate documents.
Did you have one?
Yep.
Chris, you need one?
I'm good.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the main document, and then when we jump to the attachments, if necessary, I'll go to those attachments. I think it might not be necessary for the technical correction. Okay, so up front, it's got at the top in red. The red is mostly what you're going to want to pay attention to, that this is the fiscal year 24 governor recommended budget reviewed by the House Committee on Transportation. You'll see in the beginning, that first italicized red bolded piece, House Transportation Committee concurs with the fiscal year 24 governor's recommended budget, except where otherwise noted below. There is an asterisk to correspond with a note in the first box for B900, and that will say on the next page, the House Committee on Transportation, HTC, has not finished its review of the revised fiscal year 2024 transportation program proposed by the administration and may have additional recommendations to the B900 sections once the transportation bill is finalized for introduction. I think this is pretty standard approach as in past years where you haven't finished your work on the T-bill, and since the T-bill needs to align with since the big bill needs to align with the authorizations in the T-bill, that's a piece that can't be finalized yet. That's why section 1 is typically the last section of the T-bill that's finalized. Okay, now we've got a bunch of technical corrections. Chris walked through these yesterday. These are going to be for the B903 appropriation, the B906 appropriation, and the B919 appropriation. There is a footnote for that as well. That's the 2 stars. Technical corrections are needed to align the originally proposed appropriations to the revised fiscal year 2024 transportation program proposed by the administration. Technical corrections do not reflect programmatic adjustments initiated by HTC. And that's some of those like revised pages that you had in your binders and the typographic error that's going to be fixed in section 1C of the T-bill. Chris made this chart. This is attachment 1. Nothing has changed to this since you saw it yesterday. I'm going really quick because this is stuff that's repeating what Chris did yesterday. I'm going to pause there. Any questions on the overarching, we agree, accept as noted, we're not done with the T-bill, and these are technical corrections that need to be made? Okay.
We're good.
That was simple. Now let's get to the tougher stuff. On page 3, this is the committee's response to the $3 million and the governor's recommend general fund money for the connectivity grants for the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. This is the only place where the committee is responding to this recommendation is what you see in the box on page 3, which reminds me, I'm going to put page numbers in this document. I think it'll make it easier. Which is on page 3. There is nothing in the memo. So what you see here is the committee's response. It's saying HTC supports additional investments in the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail and other rail trails in Vermont, but does not presently prioritize this proposal. HTC notes that VTrans is currently deploying $2 million from a congressional earmark on similar activities in communities along the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. HTC recommends revisiting the topic during the fiscal year 2024 Budget Adjustment Act, when the remaining balance of existing funds and future plans for additional funds are more clearly understood. This is something that the committee needs to agree that I captured with Chris's assistance, what it is that you sort of landed on yesterday in your discussions.
So committee, or is it everybody on board with this? Looking, nodding heads. Oh. What? Okay.
Okay.
Question. Madam Chair,
Representative McCoy.
is the $2 million in the capital bill?
No, it's in Senator Sanders.
Oh, it's not anywhere? It's just coming?
The testimony that we received was had an earmark from Senator Sanders to do what's now going on and they've awarded a portion of that. I think I have to look back on this, but I think about 800,000 of it for scoping studies and that there was a remaining balance. So that's that they got it. And I think
Where does that flow through?
And sorry, and I think Chris. Sorry, say that again.
Does it flow through state monies or does it just go directly to do not pass go?
I'm gonna refer this to Chris because Chris helped us track that down. He sent an email. Do you mind, Chris, if I?
Sure. For the record, Chris Joint Fiscal. My understanding, and I will triple check this, is there are some grants in the Bike and Ped program, but the bulk of this money is not involving T funds. It's federal funds, and the local communities are responsible for the 20% match.
Okay.
You'll see a statewide item in the Bike and Ped section.
Those funds still have to show up somewhere. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, that's my.
Yeah, so I'm talking about federal dollars or, like, yes, okay.
Oh, that's what I wanted to
Yes.
know. So in the general fund or are they in the capital, are they in transportation?
They're in our bill.
In transportation.
The white one.
The white book. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Did you have a question, Representative? Okay. Just checking.
I think the next two will be easy. C106 and C107 that you are asked to comment on. It said in the notes in the document you were sent, this might be addressed in the Budget Adjustment Act by the Senate. That is expected to happen per the Committee of Conference report, which was on the notice calendar for the Senate today. So the note that is included here is this language is expected to be incorporated into the BAA for both the calculation of the Transportation Fund Reserve for the two applicable years. And I think This is not something that will be confusing to the House Appropriations Committee. They will know that it happened, and Chris will make sure that it's not duplicated in the big bill.
I think that we can move on. That was a great.
This is going to be the big one, well, the first of the two big ones. So D101A1 was not included in this chart. That's why the entire thing is red, to show that it was an addition. And in the little box, which was too little to get all the committee's thoughts into, it says, this was not included in the budget memorandum to HTC. However, HTC most strongly supports this transfer, which the fiscal year 2024 transportation budget relies upon to maximize federal funding opportunities. Reducing or removing this transfer will necessitate significant reductions in proposed project activity. See attachment 2. And this is where you are utilizing a memo to provide more explanation than what could fit into that little box. I'm going to switch over to the memo, which you all have a copy of. That's your attachment 2. Okay, perfect. So at the outset, I'm going to point out that this is being sent to the Chair of House Appropriations. It's being CC'd to the Chair of House Ways and Means. I included that. I don't think it was something you talked about yesterday, but since there is in the memo a reference to say the Revenue Committee should also be looking at this, I felt like it made sense to let the Revenue Committee Chair know that you were saying that they should be looking at this. Date we can fill in later. Subject, state fiscal year 2024 budget. So just an explanation of what the purpose of this memo is. This will serve as attachment 2 to the House Committee on Transportation's response on the state fiscal year 2024 governor's recommended budget. And then it says specifically it's on sections D101A1 and D101D2. The House Committee on Transportation Committee provides this memorandum as elaboration for its position on these two items in the governor's recommended budget. In being aware of what's getting sent to editing and knowing some of the conversations my colleagues have had with other committees, I do not think it is going to be usual for House Appropriations to get a memo for what wouldn't fit in the boxes in the chart. So, doing a general overarching overview of the transportation funding gap issue. The committee shares the governor's concerns over the anticipated future transportation funding gap. The committee feels very strongly that Vermont should maximize every available opportunity to use federal funds to have a maximum impact on the state's transportation system. As you know, the administration has projected an approximately $79 million shortfall between forecasted transportation fund revenues and anticipated non-federal match needs to maximize federal funding from the IIJA for state fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2026. The governor's recommended budget proposes to close this gap by 1, and this is for the coming fiscal year, transferring the $11 million from the general fund to the transportation fund for fiscal year 24, and 2, holding the $68 million amount of general fund monies in reserve to meet the match needs in fiscal year 25 and 26. And then it's splitting it to give what the committee's thoughts are on each of these two pieces. I'll talk about this paragraph and then we'll jump back to the chart. Or actually, then I'll pause so you can have a discussion. The committee respectfully urges the House Committee on Appropriations to concur with the proposed transfer of $10,925,000, et cetera, in general fund monies to the Transportation Fund in state fiscal year 2024. This funding is an integral component of the agency's proposed state fiscal year 2024 transportation program, which the committee intends to recommend be adopted through the transportation bill with only limited amendments. Absent the transfer of the general fund monies, the Agency of Transportation will likely have to significantly reduce the number of projects scheduled for delivery in state fiscal year 2024. So I'm going to pause there, and the discussion point is, does this little box plus this portion of the memo fully capture and convey what it is that you want to say now to House Appropriations on that $11 million state fiscal year 2024 approach?
I have to say, I think you captured our conversation really very well, especially considering it was through translation.
Oh, I had a good translator.
A good translator. So, but others, how do other committee members feel about this?
Yeah. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Do we respectfully urge or do we strongly, most strongly? I wasn't here for all of that conversation. Which one is it? There's a both. Most strongly supports and respectfully concurs.
I love being consistent, so if you want, I'm
I've
happy
seen you
to
work that way
change.
before. I don't want to necessarily change them or not, but that is right up your alley in terms of being the same.
Just say insist.
That wasn't one of the choices.
I think they both convey a certain level of urgency.
You also could choose to convey your level of urgency in two different ways,
Right.
if you don't want to be consistent in phrasing.
I do not.
Being consistent, I mean,
So consistent in which phrasing? Would you prefer to most strongly support or
You may, you
respectfully
decide.
urge?
I wasn't here. I didn't benefit from that conversation.
I actually think it's fine the way it is.
You put passionate, most strongly. Okay, let's
I
have them
like
separately. They convey.
What was the other very strongly?
All right, so it says most strongly. I will say that this chart is saying, and it's the column heading for next to notes, priority, high, medium, low. Chris's first iteration of this chart that he sent to me, instead of saying high, he had said highest, which I think is where some of like the approach of most strongly, this is sort of like top priority. I don't know if the committee necessarily had a thought process on like ranking priorities. I know that sometimes comes up in some of the other policy committees. All of the priorities that are filled in here are high, which then I think sort of takes away from the ranking. You didn't say anything was a low priority. So you did take something, off that was a proposal. So that's kind of akin to saying it was a low priority for the committee. So I think that's a little bit of this document looking for ranking highest, things like that. And this document more being able to add color to a small box.
Yeah, I would just say, I think the way it's done is personally fine by me because I think this is a letter and using this language, committee respectfully urges, is kind of more in tune with the way that we write some of our letters to our colleagues, to other committees. And whereas on this, it's a form and we're trying to convey the strength of our recommendation or where it fits. So I do appreciate consistency and I appreciate people noticing those details. I'm the daughter of a copy editor, so, but I did not inherit that gene. So I appreciate other members doing that. But Representative Dodd, you had your hand up.
I just had a quick question from, if I may ask, Representative Shaw. You had mentioned at one point when we were debating about the, not debating, but just discussing the ask for the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, 3 million extra.
Can I just ask that why don't we go back to that? But let's just finish this little section here because you're asking us to go back, right? Because we're on the 10. I just want to put a bow on the language. That's all. I'm not trying to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
But are people okay with keeping the language as it is? Okay, great. So just wanted our attorney to have that. So
The answer.
Representative Dodd, do you want to go back to,
Well, this is in relation to the actually 908, B908 for public transit. Imagine that.
I think, I'm going to ask,
So this is, I don't know whether we captured in our discussion about the LVRT funds that we had said something about suggesting that money goes instead to.
so let me, we did have some discussion about whether, and I think about whether that request from Green Mountain Transit should go to the Appropriations Committee.
Right.
And that is something that the committee can decide. I will say that the committee we have not yet done our markup of our bill. So if we say, if we send that request to appropriations, we do lose control of that decision. About whether, we leave that decision to the Appropriations Committee. And I'm not sure if that's your intent when you're asking that.
Well,
And I wanted to
I was
give,
just trying to understand what,
Well,
if that conversation happened in the context of this, but I don't see it on the write-up. I'm just trying to clarify.
So I can tell you, it's not addressed here, but to the extent that you're asking about B908, I would say that the star for the first footnote does not close the door on
Right.
this committee saying something in the future related to public transit. It can be for this committee to decide what and how and when it wants to do that. But I'm just saying, not addressed here, except I think the footnote leaves the door open to certainly raise it in the future.
And we don't lose control.
Yeah, does that, I just want to make sure that the entire committee understands, especially, you know, that comment and just the where we are with our process.
And to answer your question, not to contradict numbers, but I think maybe what you're getting at, and I think it is appropriate if you want to go down that path, is that the $3 million that we're saying that we're not comfortable with, if you want to make a recommendation to the appropriations to say, hey, we're going to, we're fine if you cut it, but if you cut it, please consider funding public transit, make that request. And we still have the authority,
It's true.
the option to go through our book and find money, but then it's on two plates. It's on their plate and it's on our plate. So I'm not saying that our committee wants to go down that, but to be fair, you could make that note saying, hey, that $3 million that potentially going to get freed up, please consider funding fare free. So that is a discussion if you want to bring forward to the committee that you most certainly can have, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciated that Representative Shaw is the one that really put it on the table last discussion.
That's fine, and I want to have the discussion. However, the $3 million is not in the T-bill.
Right.
Well, that's why it's a request. This whole thing is a request.
Yeah, that's why all of this, yeah.
It's not even in our budget at all.
It does appear in the one-time tab, that like very last tab in your binder where you get that $6.5 million, the $3 million for connectivity grants and then the $3.5 million for the St. Albans facility. I think the reason why you're not being asked to comment on that here is because that's in the capital bill, not in the big bill. It's connecting some funds.
And I can just assure you, Representative Dodd, we're going to be talking about this. It's not that it's not going to be talked about in our committee.
Great. I thought this was the time to do it because we had talked about it and we were talking about this.
So-
And it is, in my opinion.
So it can be, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, I mean, Representative Corcoran is correct. We will also be talking about it within the context of our bill. And I'll just be, what we have heard from, right now, I will just say, the general fund is doing an unusual thing. There's being asked to pick up $10.9 million of projects that are in our sandbox, that is unusual for it to happen. So I'm just gonna kind of lay this out pretty clearly to ask them, we're asking them very strongly to take up the 10.9 to cover our projects. We can ask them to also consider covering Green Mountain Transit if we haven't had a committee discussion yet about what that number should be. But I just have to say that there are a couple of decisions that we could make. We could put it there and we could talk about it in our committee, or we can also talk about it in our committee and try to find that money when we go through the T-bill. So I'm just laying it out. Those are all the options that we have before us. We haven't had a chance to digest the testimony and have a committee discussion on the testimony that we heard this morning. So, and we did, the vice chair did recommend that they knock on that door, on the appropriations door. And as we saw in that letter that Clayton Clark sent to us, he sent that letter to our committee and to the member of the appropriations who holds the transportation, the transportation budget. So they are aware that these conversations are happening. So I'm just laying this out for the committee. And so if you want to make a recommendation, we can have a discussion and the committee can, have a discussion and vote on it. But I just want to assure you that we are going to be discussing it within the T-bill also.
Right.
So because
Please, yeah.
So because it was not part of the request from the Appropriations Committee, I think it would be more appropriate for us to do it the way that was just explained within our bill, because I don't think we should open it, say, pick the scale.
What's that?
I don't, never mind. It's a colloquialism.
Slab, okay.
I don't think we should do that here. We should just concentrate on just asking about the concerns that the Appropriations Committee has as they address this. I think that would be the wisest thing to do right now. And then flesh out the other funding piece as we get either next week or the week after next, when we just get in the market. We haven't thrown you off the boat yet.
So if I'm understanding, it sounds like this doesn't preclude us from deciding to ask for the million from the appropriators if we decide to go down that path. We haven't made a decision yet, one way or the other.
Yeah. Representative Burke?
Well, again, I'm not sure that this is where we're gonna be talking about, but we have not, when we went through like the 101, we didn't go through some of the things related to the MPI grant, amount of money, et cetera, things like that. But we haven't had a discussion about it. Just wanted to, doesn't have to be right now. Just wanted another thing that sort of came up there.
Right, so before we leave this week, we are gonna be looking through another draft of the bill, and we're also gonna be looking at the budget. And there were some budget, like, there are a few things that have come up in this committee with requests for money, GMT, one of them, MTI grants, there are a few things. So, we will, you're absolutely right, we have not gotten there yet. And my sense of things is that we'll be making those decisions a little bit more when we come back from town meeting. Go ahead.
So that's what I just want to get a sense of. Is your sense that we're going to complete just the letter with the attachments this week?
Today.
Oh, today.
It's due today to House Appropriations, yeah. So this is the draft, yeah, this is.
Okay.
That's what we were asked to do, so.
Yes.
Yeah. Representative Hutch,
Yeah, I guess I'm okay either way, but it seems like, do you think we would be able to find the money in the T-bill, or are we gonna end up in the end asking if we go with supporting Green Mountain Trans GMT's request to provide that holdover, the time to do the zero fare. If we do that while we're discussing the bill, and if we were to agree that we wanted an amount of money, $1 million, are we gonna find it within the bill to do it?
it's premature for me to say that to the committee, because we haven't done that work. But historically, this committee has done that in the past, but I think we have to, you're asking me to make a decision with that, which we haven't had a committee discussion about. So we will be doing that.
So can I ask, when we get to that point, if, hypothetically, if we said, no, we wanted to go that way, but we wanted to try to attach it to the to House, instead of putting it here, we could make that request at a later time, or not? Or this is the one time at this is your one time at the faucet,
There's never.
I'm just asking.
So this is a time when the chairs get together and figure it out. Excuse me, I'll defend you here.
Yeah.
This is, the chairs will figure this out if we make a request, and if they can't figure it out, then we'll do it as we go through the T-bill. We'll start hunting for money. Areas that are fungible, that we can take money from. So that at that point, everybody's, there's other people.
Yeah.
So we'll do it all in one fell swoop.
All right.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
It's just a process.
technically, it's not our only shot at it. Theoretically, yes, because you want to get in there before all the decisions are made. I mean, we could go to the floor and as a committee and offer an amendment. Ain't gonna happen, but theoretically, we could do that. This is, the time. And to be clear, I do agree with the chair and vice chair that this probably isn't appropriate time to put that request in, because it's not gonna happen. I just wanted to be fair to Representative Dodd, saying this is the opportunity and not, mislead you.
Right.
Yeah.
And to that point, we're not addressing the JTOP money in this.
Right.
Which is something the committee is very strongly.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chairman. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, you were looking at me, but I wasn't sure if it was my turn.
No, I wasn't
Yeah,
sure if you were done, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it just seems like with what the information that we got, the document that we got, and the further information about the ridership number and how those stick factors, that it speaks to this whole thing of leveraging federal funding opportunities, and that we are, based on 6 different stick factors that we're somewhat comfortable in 4 of the 6. And that's with zero fare, that we could lose, and we get about $500,000 per stick factor. So if we lose, 2 of the factors that right now we're only partially there at achieving, then we will potentially lose another $1 million. And it's sort of like, do we introduce?
So-
we're still talking about leveraging federal dollars here, and so.
So
that's
I'm
why
just gonna make a request, because we haven't had committee discussion about what we heard, the testimony that we heard today, which was we've had a lot of testimony about public transit. And I just would like to request to the committee that we can have that conversation, that we can have a full conversation about that alongside the other priorities that we're hearing from, that we will go through our process. And I don't think it's the same federal dollars that we're talking about, because the IIJA money is for construction dollars, it's not for public transit dollars. So I just to put a bow on that, if you can, I would like to be able to have a fuller committee discussion about the what we've heard from Green Mountain Transit. And I'm just feeling like right now if you want to put a proposal on the table, Representative Dodge, you can do that and we can vote on it. But I would prefer that we actually have a full discussion of this, so that we can, come to some consensus and go through the material that we heard this morning. And it's hard. This is hard. We have this deadline we're moving into this place where things don't necessarily. This memo would be easier to write after we wrap up our work on the T-bill. And that's not the process that we that we have. And it's hard for our colleagues in the policy committees they have a kind of a different rhythm to their work. They're doing policy work, and then they're coming in and hearing asks. And we're doing this while we're also working on our budget bill. So it's a little bit out of step. But that's the process that we have here. Are you good with that?
I mean, I'm outnumbered, so it doesn't matter.
No, you're not. No, wait a second. That's not how it works. You can make a proposal, and then the committee can decide. We're a committee. So if you want to make a proposal, right now, I would say that we are limited on our time today to have a full discussion, but I am asking you, can we, if we want to have the discussion about Green Mountain Transit now rather than later, you can put a proposal on the table that if you wanted to add something to this chart, and we can take a straw poll vote in the committee, if that's what you want to do.
I don't want to impose, a discussion if we're not ready for it, and so I'm happy to take your advice.
Yeah. We will be having time to talk about this. It is clearly, I'm hearing so much that from the entire committee that we want to address it. So I want to give it adequate time.
Okay, so I think we are now on the chart, E101A3, the second to last row on the page that we're on. And this is the $523,000 transfer from the transportation fund to the downtown transportation and related capital improvement fund. And the response is that this is a high priority. HTC supports this annual transfer, which is level funded with fiscal year 2023. Can't remember if it was for fiscal year 2023 or fiscal year 2022 was when it went from the $423,000 to the $523,000 amount. And this is staying consistent with at least what was the last fiscal year transfer.
So I think there was pretty much agreement in the committee on this, so am I looking around the table? Yeah, no, I see nods. All right.
Okay, so now we are at the reserve of the $68 million amount, and this is now thinking about the approach for state fiscal year 25 and 26. The box says HTC strongly supports optimizing opportunities presented in the IIJA and providing the necessary funding for the non-federal match in order to meet future federal match requirements under the IIJA. Can't fit it all in a box. See attachment 2.
So the rest of this is,
In the memo.
okay.
That's on the back side, right?
So this is the second topic under the transportation funding gap. Reserve of $68 million in general fund monies for transportation fund, state fiscal years 2025 and 26. While the committee acknowledges the many competing demands for general fund monies, it would also like to stress the importance of finding a path to closing the funding gap in state fiscal year 25 and 26. The committee strongly supports identifying revenue sources to enable the state to meet future non-federal match needs and acknowledges that there are other alternatives to the governor's recommended budget that would address the underlying structural gap facing Vermont's transportation systems and meet the agency's needs in state fiscal year 25 and 26 and beyond. To deal with the underlying structural deficit, the committee suggests that the House Committee on Appropriations revisit the appropriateness of the Transportation Fund's $20 million annual support of the state police, the JTOC appropriation, in future fiscal years. The committee also suggests that the House Committee on Ways and Means consider the impact of Vermont's relatively stagnant transportation revenues in a time of high inflation and an unprecedented level of federal investment. State Transportation Fund revenues are not keeping up with the expected non-federal match needs or growth in base costs. I think this is I stop, you discuss. I will say that I'm going to move the quotation mark to after appropriation for JTOC appropriation, because I think when people say it in quotes, it's the JTOC appropriation, not JTOC. That's not really something you would put in quotes. So I will move that.
So we had a long conversation with Chris yesterday about this. How do people feel about this language? Does it capture our discussion? Representative McCoy?
Well, I think it's kind of nebulous when we say we're not acknowledging there are other alternatives to the governor's recommended budget. What are those? I mean, I may disagree with some of those other alternatives, so in saying yes to that, I'm certainly in favor of clawing back the 20.2 million JTOC money to alleviate that, as well as the 50 million we give in our purchase and use to education. But it's, I don't know what the other alternatives are.
I think one of the alternatives that you mentioned just now is one of them, like, what the purchase and use tax. I mean, as a committee, we've heard from our joint fiscal staff about, a number of those options. We've heard from the administration when Bradley Kuchenberger's here too. I mean, I think that's what our discussion was yesterday, and that's reflected here, but I mean, maybe I'll give Chris.
Madam Chair, I think that's spot on, and Representative McCoy, I think you very astutely pointed out that the language is deliberately somewhat nebulous, and the other alternatives specifically are what are mentioned in the second paragraph. So those could include, but are not limited to, revisiting JTOC and the current law funding situation. So I think the way that, at least the intent behind the drafting of that, was to be relatively open-ended and accommodate things such as that conversation about purchase and use, or the JTOC, or other things that aren't explicitly called out here.
Representative McCoy, I'm looking at you. Do you have a follow-up question or?
Well, I mean, to me, I'm reading this, it screams we're gonna increase fees. And I am absolutely against that for having the millions of dollars of, surplus that we have, that we're raising fees in a time that we should be taking the 20.2 million back, and we should be taking the 50 million back. These are our fees that somehow we've given away for years. That's $70 million a year. Every year. And we're asking for 68 for 1 year to be held in reserves, which means the following year, if we claw all this money back, it's 70 million. We don't have to raise fees. But this, to me, suggests we're asking Ways and Means to consider, raising fees. And that's what I read from this. I may be wrong, but that's what it looks like to me.
Other thoughts? I do think that I respectfully, hear what you're saying, and I do think that there were I heard that this was part of the discussion that we had, and there might not be agreement on this part of the memo, but let's. Representative Shaw?
I said yesterday when we were talking about this that, we may need to have to talk about a few of them. Wasn't prepared to talk about it at all. And I'm wondering if we're going to put that in about, you don't have to say fee bill to translate the language. And I'm wondering if I would feel better. I'm not sure about Representative Coy, but I would feel better if we called out the transfer from the purchase and use tax as another source of revenue, just to give the Appropriations Committee, who are all 7 new members on the Appropriations Committee, the understanding is that there are other transportation funds being used in other areas. And I would feel better if we're going to leave the piece for Ways and Means, and I would feel better about it if we also put in a sentence or whatever necessary to call out the purchase and use tax transfer.
So moved. Make a recommendation to add the language. Fine. This is the letter.
We have a motion on the floor that the people support adding that language to the bill. Can I have a show of hands? Those who are in support.
What is the
Just to add the language of the potential option of the purchase and use tax, the 50 million for their mean, if they're gonna cut that $68 million, that should be part of their deliberations.
I just,
Sure, we had discussion. We should have some discussion.
the only thing that happens is that goes to the local government.
I understand that, but this is a letter laying out the recommendations, and I'm sure they're gonna have that discussion, but that shouldn't preclude us from putting that in this letter for their consideration.
Just to look at.
To look at it, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'd also like to comment that we haven't raised fees in so long, and fees are user fees. Fee based on the use. You buy a car, you pay the tax. If you don't buy a car, you don't buy the tax, so it's a very specifically, and since we haven't raised them in, how many years has it been?
6, I believe, yeah. And some of the pressure is coming up with it's, as Bradley pointed out, that pressure is from the work for the salaries and fees that goes up because of people who are delivering those services. So anyway, but is there further discussion about the suggestion?
I thought that one of the key parts of what Representative Shaw said is that if there's 7 new members on the committee, and I know what I feel like as a new member, I'm sure they have so much going on that a clear statement of at least letting them know that transportation produces $50 million and it is taken and put into education, at least that they're aware, because they're certainly not all necessarily right aware that we take $20.25 million out and give it to the state police or to the public safety and health safety. It's not all just the state police, right? The whole thing. So I find some value in that they understand that transportation monies are taken out and we are asking for transportation money to come back.
So I see, and Representative Pouch?
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, if we're gonna put here, these are, other ways to go about it. We're not suggesting it, but these are other ways, or maybe we are, the JTOC, the money that's given to education. I don't know why we wouldn't put in it. If we don't do this, we would be, remiss. We would need to look at other sources, including raising fees. And I said this word yesterday, and I have never heard anybody else say the word, but our gas tax. Yeah. Because if that money doesn't come back to us, we're gonna have to do something. So, I mean, I guess I'm all right with adding it the way it is. I mean, my preference would be, we say these are the things we're talking about. Not suggesting we do it.
Just drop a few more bombs.
So, okay,
Right.
Gas tax.
okay, so Representative,
Well, man, I guess I will just add that that's a fair point, but I think it's the wrong committee to make that statement.
Yes.
That's the
Okay.
Ways and Means Committee, this is appropriations.
Okay,
If we want to do a separate letter to Ways and Means, then that'd be the chair's discretion, but I think for now, just to leave it, as my motion stated.
okay. And so I'd be all right with it. I got to say my point,
Yeah.
okay.
Other,
So I'll say as the chair, if this is one thing that we can do to help bring the committee together on this, I think, and if people feel comfortable with it, I think it would be helpful. So if we could just have a show of hands, who's supportive of adding the language, which has happened to just before our very eyes, in real time. So can I have a show of hands, please, just who are supportive of this?
Okay.
Of adding?
Language.
Well, she did it while we were in the.
Yeah, you can change the
You
language.
can change the language, I'm just saying.
Starting point.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a concept, not
A concept.
the actual language.
I think it's both. I mean, I think the concept has to translate into words on the page, so, and we can.
I support the concept, but I want to see the words, so you're asking me to vote yes without.
No, I'm asking, the motion.
I'm asking, are those the words we're voting on?
We're not voting on those words. The motion is of whether the committee is open to adding those words, and then if so, we will wordsmith it with our attorney. So can I just see a show of hands of who's in support of doing that? I can't see, okay, great. And it looks like I can't see Representative Campbell.
You want me to stop the share?
Can't vote anyway.
Oh, he's not on. I'm
Oh, yeah.
sorry. I thought he was on. So, and
At
that's
least not
right.
yet.
I don't know what the, sorry, Anthea. So I think we have a 10-0-1 on that straw poll. So let's look at some language. This is our work.
Rules change language.
So let's give our amazing attorney who can listen to what we're saying and type at the same time.
Rotates now.
Oh, yeah, I'll do it later. Unfortunately, this doesn't then save into our system. I'll go back to my office again.
So I'm pausing because let us know when are you done?
I'm done tinkering with it, but I am at
Okay.
committee's disposal in terms of tinkering with it more, but
Okay, so great. So I couldn't tell if
I'm pausing.
you're pausing. Okay, so let's read it.
So we're asking Ways and Means to take a look at that because it's a tax, right?
And I do believe that Ways and Means has sort of committee jurisdiction over the education fund. You're not asking for a change in appropriation, like with the transfer in statute, it says this portion of the revenue goes from there.
Also ask the committee appropriations to also be aware of that. Or will they be aware of it with just the language of how it's written?
So this memo is going to House Appropriations with a CC to Ways and Means. the way that this paragraph is structured, you're specifically suggesting that House Appropriation revisit the appropriateness of the annual support for JTOC, and then saying Ways and Means should look at this other two pieces. You could say House Appropriations look at this, House Ways and Means look at the fees, and then both committees look at this. You could also take out some of the directive and say, to deal with the underlying structural deficit, the committee suggests that the General Assembly revisit, and then you're not saying one way or the other, and don't then say suggest that the House Committee on Ways and Means consider the impact, but just sort of have it be the General Assembly revisit and then do 1, 2, 3. I
think, is this what you're?
I think this is more direct than saying the General Assembly.
You could say the committee suggests that the House Committee on Appropriations and as appropriate, the House Committee on Ways and Means look at these 3 things.
I like that, actually, yeah. Because those are the money committees that do that work.
I'd love to just tell them, go ahead and do it, and it'll be okay, but it's not gonna happen anytime soon.
We've been trying.
That's gonna be a weird.
Oh, did you want to
Apologies.
take it out by 1, 2, 3, or this is a
No,
paragraph? I don't think so. I
what you had,
didn't,
Anthony,
I thought it was
fine.
good, yeah.
Okay, consider. So then for this, you want it to also say the House Committee on Appropriations and the House Committee on Ways and Means as appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Please.
I'm just going to take the bolding and the underlining away because I feel like it's distracting, but know that most of this paragraph is now changed.
We're gonna see a final another draft.
I'd like to be able to see it.
Let's do it tonight.
Yeah, I'd like, Diane needs this, so. And this is what the big. So if folks can read this on the screen.
I think that this is sort of awkward.
Is it not the motor vehicle purchase and use tax?
What did I say?
It just says the purchase and use
Yes.
tax, so.
I will say that in my notes down here, I think I said motor vehicle. Because it's the sales and use tax, and it's the purchase and use tax. So it's when you say purchase and use tax, it only applies to motor vehicles, but you're right.
Okay.
People who are reading this will not necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. That's good.
I'm giggling because if we get those two appropriations back, the transportation fund is keeping up with it.
Right.
Do you want to say are not currently keeping up with?
No, I'm just giggling at myself, I guess.
All right, so Representative Crouch?
No, I thought about clarifying something, but I think it's fine.
So let us know when you're done. It looks like, I mean,
So it, can I just, so it says, consider the impact of Vermont's relatively stagnant transportation revenues and the 1/3 of the revenue from the motor vehicle and use tax. It's really the stagnant transportation revenues, I guess they are stagnant, but here we're not saying, we need to increase them. Here we're just saying we're looking to get the money to stay in the transportation.
So for the fee piece, and I think Chris can chime in if I get this wrong, the issue is that it is stagnant and it's not keeping pace. For the purchase and use tax, that is doing well, and it is not all going to the transportation fund. So I think there is a attempt at a distinction where, for one, it's because I don't think anyone has suggested raising the purchase and use tax. I think it's saying we just think that that portion, that third, should not go to the ed fund.
Okay, I'm all
Well,
right.
I just think it reads kind of weird, like the committee also suggests that in a time of high inflation and unprecedented level of federal investment, the House Committee, blah, 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 consider the impact of the transfer of the 1/3.
Do you want to say transportation fee revenues?
Something, well, it's.
Or motor vehicle
It's
fee
a
revenues?
tax, though. You already have that in there, but we should consider you have as appropriate, let's see. That, I guess I'm trying to figure out the House Committee on Appropriations and Ways and Means consider the appropriateness of the transfer of 1/3 of the revenue from motor vehicles purchase and use tax to the education fund pursuant to statute.
So
And then you can say that state transportation revenues are not keeping up with expected non-federal match needs or growth in base rates.
So I think I'd like to hear some before we, can we read, Representative Bartholomew, you had a comment?
Those are really two distinct things, right? The relatively stagnant and the transfer.
Right.
Yes.
And grammatically, it says two different things, but it doesn't pop out. I'd like it to somehow be maybe even two separate sentences to really say that there's this one and this one. If you're reading it quickly, you're not going to pick up that there are actually two different things there. I'd like it to pop more. I was also wondering up there, consider the transportation at 20 million. Is it consider or reconsider?
JTAC is definitely a reconsider because we've asked that for years.
And it's three things then.
So folks.
No, I know, I'm just
I agree with you.
looking at that one word when.
I think we just want to have one at a time, if that's, because we do need to, we're honing in on it, so this is good.
That's
So is that,
That's
so,
all I had to say.
so Anthony, did you,
So I think if you want to keep it as a paragraph, maybe changing, reconsider the transportation fund's $20 million support of JTAC, period. The committee also suggests that in a time of high inflation and an unprecedented level of federal investment, the House Committee on Appropriations and the House Committee on Ways and Means, as appropriate, consider both, so sort of saying we're now going to talk about two things, the impact of Vermont's relatively stagnant motor vehicle fee revenues and the 1/3 of the revenue that's being transferred. I think another approach, which this is what I started to do, was doing like 1, 2, 3, then you're making it clear that there are three things. but it sounded like the committee wanted it more to be like.
I just, you know,
That would have been-
I think that this, I think that this captures what Representative McCoy was concerned with, and I would encourage us to, I think we're here. How does the committee feel?
Yeah, and just keep in mind that the amount of time that the Appropriations Committee is gonna be less time that we're dealing with it now.
So I would say.
Well, you know, just keep it in perspective here, you know,
Yeah.
this is a letter.
It's a letter,
We
it's a
don't want
letter, okay?
Thanks, Tim.
We'll go home now,
So,
so, all right, so am I sensing from the room that the committee is comfortable with this? And then this is the I think the last piece of, am I even? Oh, no,
There-
almost the
There are
last piece.
two very technical things in your chart.
So, but just to put a bow on it. I think, okay, looking around the room, thumbs up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anthea.
Yes, no problem. I will just do the two other things. I just want to send this to myself first.
Yes.
Somehow those changes get lost. Okay, so going back to your chart, oh, wrong part of the chart. Going back to your chart, that will take care of the first item on the last page. And then for E100, this is the establishing the 3 new permanent classified motor vehicle inspector positions. You were asked to comment on this. And it says HTC supports the 3 new positions requested by DMV, which are primarily funded through a federal formula grant. However, per DMV, these positions should be permanent classified, not limited service, and you'll see that change made in both places.
So we didn't have extensive discussion about this, but I think we've been understanding that this is something that the committee had support. Is this accurate for folks? Representative Shaw, you're nodding.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. It's something that's just we're putting it in practice what we're doing now. We're just using classified employees as permanent employees, so I think we're okay.
We heard this when Commissioner Manoli came and gave testimony. Okay, all right.
And then the last piece is the calculation of the transportation fund reserve with the reversions piece. And then there's just an error in the number that's being corrected. That's why you'll see the $20 million is in red and underlined. And then the note is HTC supports the proposed technical language with a modification to align it to the $20 million amount. Actual reversion total, CH 145, and that's the Budget Adjustment Act. This doesn't have a priority of high. It seemed like it was just sort of like a thing, but we could say it was high priority if the committee wanted to.
I think it's a technical correction, right?
Yeah, and for the other technical corrections, we did not include high in the chart.
So folks, okay with the E900? Okay.
That's good.
All right, so we have walked through the whole letter with I guess this is the chart and attachment 1 and,
Yeah.
and 2. So,
and then just for the committee vote paragraph, it says the support, the response, including attachments 1 and 2. So for your vote, you're saying it's like one package.
so with a letter to a committee, it's not a roll call vote, which is it's a straw poll vote that we do. So I hear a motion.
I move that we accept the letter presented before us. I don't know if
Okay.
there's a draft number on that, draft XXX.
There's not a draft number on anything, sorry.
Okay, great. So all those in discussion?
Just question, this, is that attached to the letter? What happens with
The
this?
letter is attached to that.
Yeah.
So this is the primary document, and the 2 other documents
Got it.
are attached to it.
It is a just a new process, yeah.
And this is the process for all committees, okay.
So, okay, great. So we have a first motion on the floor, a first that's been seconded. All those in favor, can you raise your hand? Okay, all opposed? Okay. So I think we have a 10-0-1 vote. All right, terrific. Well, Anthea, thank you, and thank you for helping us, well, he's not allowed to
Yeah, he's
vote,
not allowed.
according to our house rules, so, great.
And I'm sending that paragraph to the editors right now so that they can look at it and then I can get the letter.
Great. So what is our process, Anthea? Like, you'll send it to the editors and then,
I was gonna send it to you and Jeannie, and then I don't know who between the two of you typically would send it to.
I think with our BAA letter, I sent it.
Okay.
So, yeah, so once you get that to me, I'll send that to the chair. All right, great. All right, folks. Well, thank you. Thank you. Good. And we are back tomorrow. I'm looking at our agenda on my desk. I think we're back at 8:30 tomorrow. Okay?
I have
Person present.
one
Has
question.
everything changed, Molly?
I'm sorry?
The new, Molly and I have a meeting.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up the committee meeting, is this germane to the committee's discussion? Representative Hoy, did you, okay.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so just check it. All right, so, we'll see you all tomorrow, and with that, I think we can end our live stream. Thank you, Jeannie.
And
We can end.